Hi everyone, I'm Jack the Rambling Raconteur, and I hope that you're doing well. I want to continue the library tour with a trip down a tributary of the Penguin Classics. The Penguin 20th Century Classics that have the mint green spine and back. I think you only find these in used bookstores or charity sales now, but I might be wrong on that. I think they were published in the 1970s through the 1990s and then ultimately replaced with the black spines. But there's some pretty good volumes I have from these. So East of Eden from John Steinbeck. I first read this book when I was 16 years old. I was amazed. I thought it was the greatest novel ever written. And then a couple months later, I read The Brothers Karamazov from Dostoevsky. But this is a good book. I enjoyed the retelling of sort of the Cain and Abel dynamic and the way that was worked through. I enjoyed the descriptions, the naturalist descriptions of the Salinas Valley. And, Tim shall thou mayest. This is an effective book. I think it works well with those ideas, with those dynamics that existed in Genesis. It's up there, a step below maybe what Thomas Mann was working through with Joseph and his brothers. But it's an interesting book. And I do fall into the part of Steinbeck's readership that says this is his greatest novel and my favorite. I know there's the Grapes of Wrath portion. I know there's some fringe parties out there, but I stand firmly on this side. Another one that I read just within a year of reading East of Eden would have been Heart of Darkness from Joseph Conrad. I thought this was interesting when I first read it. It's definitely a book that now, as I read it, or if I were to reread it, I would need to read something from a native African writer immediately, like back to back with it, because of the ideas, the way that Africans are characterized within the book. But it is an incredibly effective short novel, and Conrad is almost always an incredibly effective novelist. I did have a friend in high school who did a project. We had our little projects. He did a project from Heart of Darkness where he did a song to the tune of The Grinch, and it started with "You're a mean one, Mr. Kurtz," and then he went on from there. I can't remember the rest of it, but so this is one that I think plenty of people have read both of these and shared their opinions on these. Let's move on to Memoirs of Hadrian, because this is a really cool book. I don't see nearly enough people talking about this book. This is by Marguerite Yourcenar. It was published in right around 1950, 1951. And it's a retelling of the Emperor Hadrian, who in many ways embodied, I think, the sort of Greek philosopher ideal, philosopher king ideal, to a much greater degree than the self-promoting Marcus Aurelius. But this book is fascinating. It reminded me a lot of the great I, Claudius from Robert Graves. Here we have a bronze bust of Hadrian, and we're in his thoughts. We're spending time with him. But there's also a real sense of life within the later Roman Empire under the five good emperors, and the ways in which Hadrian is trying to grapple with the limits of empire, the limits of where the empire can be pushed to. And so that was all very interesting. Of special notice that this translation is from French into English was actually done by Yourcenar's partner or wife, Grace Frick. So that's super cool as well. Our Man in Havana from Graham Greene. This book is very funny. It's a send-up of like spy novels. We have a character who's, sort of being a spy there in the Caribbean. And then gradually, he's MI6's man in Havana, but he also just starts to like send fake reports made up from vacuum cleaner instructions, quotes from the adaptations of Shakespeare that the Lambs did. So it's ridiculous, but it's fun. It's a fun book, and I enjoy Graham Greene. His best works I really enjoy. Another very funny book, Cold Comfort Farm from Stella Gibbons. I think this was one my wife actually purchased, but we both really enjoy this. It's a very, very comical novel, and one that I think it's from the 1930s, but it's very timeless in terms of the sense of humor and this really like kind way of doing humor that's not demeaning towards everybody, but that really is joyful. So I enjoy it. Nonfiction, we have John Reed's 10 Days That Shook the World, and it's now a nonfiction book on the Russian Revolution. It's incredible journalism. Reed was one of the few U.S. journalists who was there on the scene when this was going on. Now it engages in some hagiography, perhaps, of Lenin and Trotsky. Stalin hated it because he wasn't really mentioned, and so, But Reed himself was very devoted to leftist political movements and early on, like labor movements and workers' rights. He was pro-birth control at a time when that was essentially a crime. And so he was anti-war, but he was there on the scene. He moved from being a World War I reporter to being on the scene in the final days of the Kerensky provisional government and then the Russian Revolution. And ultimately would later return to Russia or to the Soviet Union and die there, but from typhus when he was in his early 30s. But this work is a very enthralling account of what's happening. At times, perhaps the integrity of it can be questioned. The film Reds was done by Warren Beatty, and that was actually what I think turned me to read this eventually. Some drama from Luigi Pirandello, 6 characters in search of an author and other plays. This one also has the great Henry IV, and then So It Is If You Think So. So I have not yet read these. I just got this like last year, but I'm really excited to get into Pirandello's drama because it's the type of sort of modern weird drama that I enjoy. And we'll close out with 2 from Frank Norris, The Octopus, possibly the most unfulfilled book of all time. It's set in this like titanic clash of personalities based on a real event that happened in 1880 in California when the railroads essentially cut deals with farmers to sell them every other parcel of land with the idea that the farmers and planters would develop those parcels of land and then be able to buy them back at a price that was, you know, not quite what they paid for the every other parcel, but that wasn't going to be exorbitant. And then, of course, the railroad turned around after everything had been developed several years later and ripped them off. Led to violence. It led to people, you know, being shot and killed at the Muscle Sloughs tragedy. So this is a book that culminates in that. And Norris wants so badly to write this epic of wheat, and he comes pretty darn close at times. The way he can describe a railroad as an octopus that's moving out and it's really incredible. And then he misses the mark. He doesn't quite get there. And then the real problem exists when he engages in, this is from 1901 or 1902, he engages in absolutely horrifying anti-Semitism. The railroad's agent is Jewish, and the characters within the book possess the same hatred for Jewish individuals that Norris himself possessed. The Pit is the second installment of that. This is from, I think, 1903, and deals with characters who are at the Chicago Stock Exchange and sort of the pit trading. And none of that is particularly relevant or interesting, honestly. But what is interesting is that we have a character who is down there as a trader at the exchange. And the most interesting character is his wife, Laura, who has this personality and has a mind of her own and a consciousness of her own. And it's almost shocking that Norris was able to honestly produce that. But this is The Pit, the second of his epic of wheat. He also wrote McTeague, which was filmed as the famous like 8-hour silent film Greed by Erich von Stroheim, which they actually shot in Death Valley for the climax scene. So anyways, these are Penguin 20th Century Classics. These are not some of my favorites, but there's some darn good books in here. Hope everybody's doing well. Thanks.